There is a sound in the world of Pokémon that is unlike any other. It is not the triumphant roar of a Charizard taking flight, nor the playful chime of a Clefairy dancing under the full moon. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated sorrow, a lonely, echoing cry that seems to carry across the tall grass and through the desolate caves of Kanto, a whimper that tells a story of profound loss. This is the cry of Cubone, the lonely Pokémon, and it cries for a mother it will never see again. Its defining feature, the very thing that makes it instantly recognizable, is the skull it wears upon its head, a helmet made of bone, polished by tears, hiding a face that no one has ever truly seen. The official lore tells us this skull belonged to its deceased mother, but the games have always remained silent on one crucial detail. What kind of Pokémon was its mother? For decades, a chilling theory has been whispered among fans, a dark and compelling piece of apocrypha that pieces together clues hidden in plain sight, and even within the broken code of the original games. It suggests a connection so morbid, so tragic, that it would reframe our understanding of two very different species forever. What if the answer to Cubone's identity and the identity of its lost mother has been with us since the very beginning, in the form of a Pokémon defined not by loss, but by motherhood itself? What if the crying orphan and the perfect parent are two sides of the same terrible coin? This story is one woven from the shared wonder of a community that has pondered this very question for generations. As we follow this thread into the shadows together, feel free to leave a like as a quiet acknowledgement if our journey resonates with you. And should you wish to continue exploring these deeper lores with us, a subscription will ensure our paths cross again. Now, our story begins not with the theory, but with the canonical truth, the foundation of grief upon which this entire legend is built. To understand the heart of the matter, we must first understand the lonely Pokémon, Cubone, from its very first appearance in the Pokémon Red and Blue Pokédex. Its identity has been inextricably linked with tragedy. The description is blunt, almost clinical in its cruelty. Wears the skull of its deceased mother. Its cries echo inside the skull and come out as a sad melody. There is no ambiguity here. This is not just an accessory. It is a memento mori, a piece of its own history that it is forced to carry. The game tells us its cries are not just cries. They are transformed by the very vessel of its loss into a haunting song. Imagine that. A creature whose expression of pain becomes a mournful lullaby, a melody born from the echo chamber of its mother's remains. But as the series progressed, the descriptions would only deepen this well of sorrow. Pokémon Yellow added another layer. Always wears the skull of its dead mother, so no one has any idea what its real face looks like. This introduces an element of perpetual hiddenness by Cryo. Cubone is not just grieving, it is masked by its grief. Its true identity is sealed away, locked behind the bone. The world does not see Cubone, it sees a walking memorial. It raises the question of whether Cubone even knows its own face, or if its reflection is forever the bleached, empty gaze of the skull it wears. The second generation of games, Gold, Silver, and Crystal, continue to elaborate on this profound melancholy. The Gold Pokédex entry tells us, if it is sad or lonely, the the skull it wears shakes and emits a plaintive and mournful sound. Its grief is not just audible, it's physical. The very symbol of its loss rattles, a tangible manifestation of its inner turmoil. Silver's entry states, "It wears the skull of its dead mother. It cries in its sleep, dreaming of its mother." This is a truly heartbreaking detail. There's no respite for Cubone, not even in slumber. When its subconscious is a landscape of loss, its dreams a nightly replay of its trauma. The cycle of sorrow is inescapable. Crystal's entry adds, "It lost its mother after its birth. It wears its mother's skull, never revealing its true face." The repetition of these core facts across games serves to solidify them as immutable truths of this creature's existence. It is born, it is orphaned, it is masked forever. By the third generation, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, the entries began to explore the consequences of this constant sorrow. Cubone pines for the mother it will never see again. Seeing a likeness of its mother in the full moon, it cries. The stains on the skull the Pokémon wears are made by the tears it sheds. This single entry is a masterclass in atmospheric storytelling. It connects Cubone's personal tragedy to a universal symbol of loneliness and longing, the moon. It's a classic image of a lonely creature howling at the moon. But here, the howl is a whimper. And then comes the detail that the stains on the skull are not from battle, not from dirt, but from the relentless flow of its own tears. The skull is not just a reminder of its mother's death. It is a canvas recording Cubone's enduring pain, each tear etching itself into the bone. Fire Red, a remake of the original, offers a slightly rephrased version of the first entry, but Leaf Green echoes the poignant detail from Yellow about its face remaining a mystery. As we move into subsequent generations, the narrative remains hauntingly consistent, with small additions painting an even bleaker picture. In Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum we are told, when it thinks of its dead mother, it cries. Its crying makes the skull it wears rattle. This echoes the detail from Gold, reinforcing the physical nature of its sorrow. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the remakes of the second generation, brought back the original entries, once again reminding players of the creature's sleepless, tear-filled nights and the rattling of its morbid helmet. The fifth generation, with Black and White, didn't introduce Cubone in its regional Pokédex initially, but when it was added in Black 2 and White 2, the lore continued to build. The entry reads, "It wears its mother's skull as a helmet. When it cries, the skull shakes and emits a sad, mournful sound." Again, the consistency is key. Game Freak has never wavered from this core identity. By the time of Pokémon X and Y in the 6th generation, the entries summarize the established lore. X reiterates the idea that no one has seen its face, while Y focuses on the connection to the full moon and the tear stains. The Hoenn remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, brought back the exact same heart-wrenching entry from the originals. This is Cubone's identity, carved in stone and bone. Then came the 7th generation, Sun and Moon, which took place in the Alola region. Here, the lore takes an interesting turn, focusing more on the future of this grief-stricken Pokémon. The Sun Pokédex tells us, when the memory of its departed mother brings it to tears, its cries echo mournfully within the skull it wears. This is familiar territory, but the moon entry offers a glimmer of hope, or at least of change. It wears the skull of its deceased mother. Sometimes, Cubone overcomes its sadness and evolves. This is the first time the Pokédex has explicitly linked Cubone's evolution to its emotional state. It implies that evolution into Marowak is an act of psychological transformation, a moving on from its crippling grief. It suggests that Marowak is not just a physically stronger form, but an emotionally resilient one. Ultrasun builds on this. The skull it wears on its head is its mother's. It's a precious treasure to Cubone, so it won't ever remove it. And Ultramoon adds another touching detail. The skull it wears is that of its mother. According to some, it evolves when it comes to terms with the pain of her death. This directly confirms the subtext from the moon entry. Evolution is acceptance. Even in Sword and Shield, available through the Isle of Armor DLC, the focus remains the same. This Pokemon wears the skull of its deceased mother. Sometimes it cries loudly in its sleep, but no one knows what it's dreaming of. This feels like a return to the bleakness of the earlier entries, stepping back from the idea of emotional recovery and reminding us that even if it can evolve, the core trauma remains, playing out in its subconscious. Finally, its reintroduction. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet via the Indigo Disc, DLC maintains the tragic through-line. One entry states, Cubone wears the skull of its deceased mother. The skull is cracked, but Cubone doesn't seem to mind. Another reiterates the idea that when it cries, the skull it's wearing rattles, making a pitiful sound. Across more than 25 years and 9 generations of games, the story of Cubone is one of unwavering, foundational tragedy. It is a creature defined entirely by an absence, a walking embodiment of grief who never allows itself or the world to forget what it has lost. Its very biology and behavior are shaped by this singular event. It cries when it's lonely. It cries at the full moon. It cries in its sleep. Its identity is hidden. Its tears stain the bone it wears. And its only path forward, evolution, is tied to overcoming a sorrow that has defined its entire existence. This brings us to the evolution itself. Marowak, the Bonekeeper Pokemon. If Cubone represents grief in its raw, helpless state, Marowak represents that grief forged into a weapon. It no longer whimpers, it fights. The Pokédex from Red and Blue establishes this transformation immediately. The bone it holds is its key weapon. It throws the bone skillfully like a boomerang to knock down its prey. The helplessness is gone, replaced by hardened competence. Yellow's entry adds, small and weak, this Pokemon is adept with its bone club. It has grown tough by overcoming the grief of losing its mother. Once again, the connection between its emotional state and its physical prowess is made explicit. It became strong because of its suffering, not in spite of it. The second generation continues this theme. Gold states, it has overcome its grief at the loss of its mother and grown tough. Its tempered spirit is not easily broken. Silver reinforces its martial skill. It is skillful at wielding the bone in its hand. It smacks foes with the bone to knock them out. And Crystal mentions the bone itself. A bone serves as its weapon. It has tossed the bone skillfully since childhood. It is said to be skilled in combat. Marowak is a survivor. It has channeled its pain into discipline and strength. The skull that was once a resonating chamber for its sorrow is now the helmet of a warrior. Generation 3 expands on the lore of the bone itself. Ruby and Sapphire tell us Marowak is the evolved form of a Cubone that has overcome its sadness at the loss of its mother and grown tough. Marowak's tempered and hardened spirit is not easily broken. This echoes the sentiment from Gold. Fire Red provides a fascinating new detail. It is small and was originally weak. Once it learns to fight with bones, it proves to be a tough Pokemon. Leaf Green continues, stating, "The bone it holds is its key weapon. It throws the bone skillfully like a boomerang to knock down its prey." These descriptions paint a picture of a creature that has gone through a trial by fire, emerging calloused and capable. The entries from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum introduce a communal aspect to the species. From its birth, this savage Pokemon constantly holds a bone. It is skilled in using it as a weapon. It's interesting to see it described as savage, a far cry from the pitiable image of Cubone. Heart Gold and Soul Silver bring back the original themes of its tempered spirit. The Unova games, Black and White, provide a piece of lore that seems almost self-contained, but adds to the mystique. The bone it carries is from its dead mother. It's a precious weapon to it. This had always been implied, but stating it so directly strengthens the link between its weapon and its past. If the skull is a shield of memory, the bone is its sword. It is actively fighting with the remnants of its lost parent. Generation 6 with Pokemon X tells us of a graveyard for Marowak somewhere in the world, a sacred place for their kind, adding a new layer of cultural depth to the species. Pokemon Y reiterates its toughness after overcoming grief. Then, like its pre-evolution, Marowak's story was fundamentally expanded in the Alola region, with the introduction of a regional variant, Alolan Marowak. This wasn't just a cosmetic change, it was a complete recontextualization of the Pokemon's relationship with death. Alolan Marowak is a fire and ghost type. Its body is sleek and black, with ghostly green flames burning at both ends of its bone club. Its Pokédex entry from Pokemon Moon is incredibly revealing. The bones it possesses were its mother's. Its mother's regrets have become like a vengeful spirit protecting this Pokemon. This is a monumental shift. The Kantonian Marowak overcame its grief. The Alolan Marowak has instead embraced it, communing with the spirit of its dead mother, who now actively protects it. The grief is no longer just a memory, it's a presence, a ghost. The Sun entry provides more context. Its custom is to mourn its lost companions. A dancing Marowak is calming spirits. Alolan Marowak is not just a warrior, it is a shaman, a spirit guide. Its entire existence is now a ritual of remembrance. It dances to soothe the souls of the dead. This is particularly poignant in Alola, a region thematically rich with traditions and connections to the spiritual world. Ultrasun describes the supernatural power of its weapon. The cursed flames that smolder on this bone cannot be extinguished with water. They say the flames are lit by the regrets of the dead. And Ultra Moon adds, "This Pokemon is possessed by a spirit of regret. It dances in mourning for its lost members." This regional form took the core concept of Marowak, a creature shaped by death, and elevated it to its most literal and spiritual conclusion. It is a being that lives in two worlds, the world of the living and the world of the dead, acting as a bridge between them. It dances to process its grief, and in doing so protects itself with the very spirit of that which it lost. It is a powerful, beautiful, and deeply melancholic interpretation of the species. So we have two defined paths: the path of Cubone, a creature consumed by grief, and the path of Marowak, a creature that has either overcome that grief to become a hardened warrior, or embraced it to become a spiritual medium for over 2 decades. This was the complete story, a self-contained tragedy about a single evolutionary line. But the question always lingered, the one the Pokédex never answered. What kind of Pokémon was the mother? And this is where we turn our attention away from the graveyard of Lavender Town and towards the open plains, to a Pokémon that represents the absolute zenith of motherhood, Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan, the parent Pokémon, is a normal type Pokémon from the very first generation. From a design perspective, it is the antithesis of Cubone. It is large, powerful, and defined not by what it has lost, but by what it has and protects so fiercely: the child in its pouch. Its earliest Pokédex entry from Pokémon Red and Blue is simple and direct. The infant rarely ventures out of its mother's protective pouch until it is 3 years old. This establishes the core dynamic. The mother is the protector, the shield, and the child is safe and nurtured within. There's no hint of tragedy here, only care and devotion. Pokemon Yellow's entry adds, raises its young in its belly pouch. It lets the baby out to play only when it feels safe. Safety is the operative word. Kangaskhan creates a bubble of absolute security for its young. As the generations continued, this theme of fierce, sometimes violent, maternal protection was expanded upon. Gold's entry states, to protect its child, it will never give up during battle, no matter how badly wounded it is. Silver adds, if it is safe, the young gets out of the pouch and plays. The adult keeps a close eye on the youngster. Crystal describes the sleeping arrangement. The grown-up Kangaskhan sleeps standing up so that it does not crush the child in its pouch. Every aspect of its biology and behavior is oriented around the well-being of its baby. It will endure any injury, sacrifice its own comfort, and unleash incredible fury to ensure its child's safety. Generation 3's Ruby and Sapphire entry gives us a glimpse into the child's life. If you come across a young Kangaskhan playing by itself, you must never disturb it or attempt to catch it. The baby's parent is sure to be close by, and it will become violently enraged at you. This serves as an in-world warning to the player. The bond is so strong that to even approach the child is to invite the wrath of the mother. Fire Red reiterates the 3-year developmental period, while Leaf Green mentions that it will lure prey close by letting the baby out as a feint, a tactic that feels a bit more cunning, but still rooted in providing for its young. The 4th and 5th generations continued to emphasize these same traits. It raises its young in its pouch. It lets the baby out to play only when it is safe to do so. The lore is consistent and straightforward. Kangaskhan is the ultimate mother. Then, in the 6th generation, came Mega Evolution, and with it, Mega Kangaskhan. This new form added a fascinating wrinkle to the lore. Upon Mega evolving, the baby actually leaps out of the pouch. It is larger, more confident, and fights alongside its mother. This is represented by Kangaskhan's unique ability, Parental Bond, which allows it to attack twice in one turn, once by the mother and a second, weaker strike from the child. With the Pokédex entries for Mega Kangaskhan explore the psychological impact of this transformation. Pokémon X tells us the child grows up under its parents' protection. It's doted on, so it's a bit spoiled. Pokémon Y gets a bit more specific about the new dynamic. When the mother sees the back of her child as it leaps out of her pouch, she thinks about the day it will leave the nest. This adds a layer of maternal bittersweetness to the transformation. For the first time, the mother is confronted with the reality of her child's impending independence. Let's go, Pikachu. And let's go, Eevee. Give a slightly more concerning take. The child is delighted to be able to fight alongside its mother, but it gets sad when the battle ends. An even darker entry from Pokemon Sun reads, Mega Kangaskhan's strength derives from the mother's happiness about her child's growth. This Pokemon's mother is worried about the child's future. But it's the Pokemon Moon entry that is the most alarming. The explosive energy of Mega Evolution stimulates the child in Kangaskhan's pouch, and it grows rapidly. The child is a top-notch fighter. This suggests an unnatural growth spurt, a childhood accelerated by the raw power of Mega Evolution. Its child becomes a capable warrior, but perhaps at the cost of its natural development. So now we have our two subjects, standing in stark, tragic opposition. On one side, Cubone, the eternal orphan, defined by the death of its mother. On the other, Kangaskhan, the eternal mother, defined by her unwavering protection of her child. The worlds they inhabit seem a universe apart. One is of sorrow and solitude, the other of fierce, nurturing love. But what if they are not separate stories at all? What if they are the beginning and end of the same story? This is the heart of the great Cubone-Kangaskhan theory. The theory, in its most popular and elegant form, is this. When a mother Kangaskhan dies, her orphaned baby, who until that point had known only the absolute safety of its mother's pouch, is left alone and defenseless. In its grief and as a desperate act of self-preservation, the baby takes the skull of its deceased mother and places it upon its own head. This traumatic event, this donning of its mother's remains, fundamentally changes the young Pokemon. It is no longer a baby Kangaskhan. It has become a Cubone. This single dark premise solves several long-standing mysteries of the Pokemon world with a chilling neatness. First, it explains the origin of the skull. It's not just the skull of a deceased mother of its own species. It's specifically the skull of a Kangaskhan. The shape of Cubone's skull helmet bears a striking resemblance to the head shape of an adult Kangaskhan, from the snout to the horn-like protuberances on the side. The bone it wields could then be one of the mother's femurs, or another large bone. Second, it provides an explanation for why we never see a baby Kangaskhan on its own. The child in the pouch is not a separate species of Pokemon. It is simply a baby Kangaskhan. It doesn't appear as a unique entity in the wild because, under normal circumstances, it is never apart from its mother. The only time we would see one alone is if the mother has died, and in that tragic event, it is no longer a baby Kangaskhan. It has become a Cubone. This also elegantly explains Cubone's unending sorrow. Its cries for its lost mother become infinitely more poignant when you realize it's crying for a mother that was the epitome of protection and care. It didn't just lose a parent. It lost the most nurturing parent in the entire Pokemon world. Its trauma is the result of being violently ejected from a world of perfect safety, bear into one of absolute solitude. Furthermore, the theory provides a potential answer to another peculiarity. Kangaskhan has no pre-evolution, and until later generations where breeding mechanics became standardized, was presented as a species that simply was. The baby in the pouch was always just there. The theory suggests a broken evolutionary line. A healthy, nurtured baby Kangaskhan grows up to become an adult Kangaskhan. But a baby Kangaskhan whose mother dies undergoes a divergent, trauma-induced transformation, becoming a Cubone. This idea that an external tragic event could trigger a change in species is a concept rarely explored in Pokemon, but feels so narratively right. It adds a layer of dark, folktale logic to the world's mechanics. Under this theory, every single Cubone you encounter in the wild is the living survivor of a tragedy. Every Marowak is an orphan that managed to survive and harden itself against the world. For many years, this compelling narrative was all the theory had to stand on: thematic resonance and morphological similarities. It was a powerful piece of fan speculation, a ghost story told around the digital campfire of early internet forums. But then players began to dig into the very code of the original Red and Blue games, and they found something that seemed to turn this dark fantasy into a tangible possibility. They found a ghost in the machine. This discovery revolved around the most famous glitch in video game history. MissingNo, short for missing number, was not a Pokemon, but a placeholder. A glitch that appeared when the game tried to load data for a Pokemon that didn't exist in a specific location's encounter table. Triggering an encounter with MissingNo had strange effects, most famously duplicating the 6th item in the player's bag. But different versions of MissingNo existed, acting as pointers to different spots in the game's code. And one specific variant of this glitch held a shocking secret. Through a complex series of events, players discovered that it was possible for certain Pokemon to evolve into completely unrelated species. One of the most famous examples of this programming anomaly was that a Marowak could, under specific glitch-induced circumstances, evolve into a Kangaskhan. This was not a clean, one-to-one evolution like a normal Marowak. It typically involved encountering a specific variant of MissingNo, which would sometimes be registered in the Pokédex and could evolve. Other reports detailed that leveling up a Marowak to level 128 under glitch conditions could also trigger this change. While the methods were esoteric and varied depending on the game version and the precise nature of the glitch, the outcome was the same. The game's code contained a broken, vestigial link between Marowak and Kangaskhan. For proponents of the theory, this was the smoking gun. It suggested that at some point in the development of Pokemon Red and Blue, Game Freak had intended for Cubone and Marowak to be part of the Kangaskhan evolutionary line. Perhaps Cubone was meant to evolve into Marowak, which could then evolve into Kangaskhan. Or maybe there was a split evolution path where a female Cubone could become Kangaskhan. The evidence seemed to point to a scrapped idea, a piece of lore left on the cutting room floor, but whose data fragments remained buried deep within the game's code, accessible only through a glitch. The theory goes that the developers decided against this macabre backstory, perhaps deeming it too dark for a children's game, and split the Pokémon into two separate evolutionary lines. They made Kangaskhan a single-stage Pokémon and Cubone-Marowak a two-stage line. But in their haste, or due to the complexities of programming on the Game Boy, they didn't fully erase the data that linked them. MissingNo was not creating this link. It was merely exposing a link that was already there, dormant and broken. This discovery elevated the theory from plausible fanfiction to a genuine Pokémon mystery rooted in the game's own archaeology. It wasn't just a story that fit. It was a story that the game itself seemed to be trying to tell. If only you were willing to break it to listen. The ghost of Marowak in Lavender Town wasn't the only ghost in the machine. The spirit of this lost evolutionary path haunted the very code of Kanto. The most potent piece of in-game lore that supports this theory, however, has always been the tragic saga of Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower. This location is the emotional nexus of the Cubone-Marowak story. When the player first arrives in Lavender Town, it's immediately apparent that something is wrong. The music is somber, eerie. The townspeople speak of ghosts and restless spirits within the tower, a 7-story graveyard for deceased Pokémon. It's here that the player's light-hearted journey to become a Pokémon master takes a sharp, poignant turn into a ghost story. Inside, you encounter channelers, psychic mediums who have been possessed by the very spirits they were trying to commune with, battling you with Ghastly and Haunter. But there is one spirit that is different, a powerful, inconsolable ghost that blocks the way to the top floor. It is immune to your Pokémon's attacks, and when you try to fight it, the game simply states, "The ghost appeared, get away." To reveal its true identity, the player must acquire the Sylph Scope, an item developed by the Sylph Code that can identify ghosts. When you return to the tower with this device, the ghost blocking the stairs reveals its true form. It is the ghost of a Marowak. The game's narrative, spoken through various NPCs, pieces together the story. Team Rocket, in one of their most villainous acts, had raided the Pokémon Tower in an attempt to steal the skulls of Cubone to sell for a high price. A brave mother Marowak stood up to them, defending its child, a small Cubone. In the ensuing struggle, Team Rocket killed the Marowak. This act of senseless violence is what has caused her spirit to linger, full of anger and sorrow, unable to move on. Her ghost now haunts the tower, driving away any intruders, especially those like Team Rocket, who would seek to desecrate the graves of Pokémon. Your battle with her is not one of conquest. When you defeat her, the game doesn't say the opponent fainted. It says, the Marowak spirit was calmed, Audrey Caron. It departed to the afterlife. Your presence, your ability to see her for what she was, allowed her soul to finally find peace. After she vanishes, you can find the orphaned Cubone she died protecting, now being cared for by Mr. Fuji at the Pokémon house. This story is the one and only time the game shows us the event that creates a Cubone. It is a canonical depiction of a Marowak mother dying while protecting her child. Now, within the context of the grand theory, this is where a fascinating contradiction, or perhaps a complication, arises. The mother who dies is a Marowak, not a Kangaskhan. This seems to be a direct refutation of the theory. If a Marowak mother gives birth to a Cubone, then Cubone is simply the pre-evolution of Marowak, and the skull it wears is that of its own Marowak mother. The line is self-contained. The Kangaskhan connection is just a coincidence, a fan-made narrative built on circumstantial evidence. Case closed, right? But the theorists have an answer for this. A darker, more complex interpretation. Perhaps Cubone isn't the first stage of this transformation. Perhaps the process is cyclical. Consider the most famous offshoot of the theory, that a female Cubone, upon evolving, becomes a Kangaskhan to become a mother herself, while a male Cubone becomes a Marowak. This would explain why all Kangaskhan are female. In this scenario, a Kangaskhan mother dies, her baby becomes a Cubone. If that Cubone is female, it eventually overcomes its grief, sheds its skull, and evolves into an adult Kangaskhan, ready to have a baby of its own and continue the cycle. If the Cubone is male, unable to become the maternal Kangaskhan, his grief hardens him into a warrior, a Marowak. Marowak, in this interpretation, is a terminal stage of the line for males. They become protectors, but not creators of new life. This sub-theory, while compelling, has a major canonical problem. We know that Marowak can be female. The ghost in the Pokemon Tower was explicitly a mother. So, a female Cubone can evolve into a Marowak. This would seem to debunk the gender-based evolutionary path. However, another interpretation could be that the Lavender Town Marowak represents a different version of the tragedy. Perhaps most Cubone are orphaned Kangaskhan, but under specific circumstances, the cycle can involve a Marowak mother instead. Or perhaps more simply, the developers had not yet fully conceived of the Kangaskhan connection when writing the Lavender Town story, and depicted the mother as the species players would associate with the child. Ultimately, the Lavender Town narrative solidifies the profound tragedy of Cubone's existence, making it a central plot point rather than just background lore from the Pokédex. It confirms that the story of the Lost Mother is not just a flavor text. It is an event that happens in the world of Pokémon with real consequences. And it's this raw emotional power that gives the broader theory its wings. We see the grief, we see the orphan, and we feel the loss. Whether the mother was a Marowak or a Kangaskhan, the core emotional truth remains the same. And it's that truth that fuels our desire to connect the dots, to solve the mystery of the skull, and to find an answer to the lonely Pokemon's cries. It cements the themes of death and grief as a core, unforgettable part of the Kanto experience, ensuring that Cubone's story would never be forgotten, and that the theories surrounding it would continue to be debated for decades to come. The skull it wears became more than just a design choice. It became a symbol of one of the franchise's darkest and most memorable tales. While the ghosts of Kanto offer a narrative glimpse into this tragedy, the living, breathing mechanics of the Pokemon world provide their own set of clues, and indeed their own contradictions. To truly investigate this connection, we must look at one of the most fundamental aspects of Pokemon biology introduced after the first generation: breeding, When Pokemon Gold and Silver brought the daycare system and the concept of Pokemon eggs, the world of Pokemon gained a new layer of biological plausibility. It also provided a new lens through which to examine old theories. Pokemon were sorted into egg groups, categories of creatures that were biologically compatible and could produce offspring. This is where the plot thickens considerably. Cubone and its evolution, Marowak, belong to the monster egg group. This group contains a wide variety of reptilian, draconic, and kaiju-esque Pokemon, from the Bulbasaur line to the Larvitar line. And crucially, Kangaskhan is also in the monster egg group. This is no small detail. It is a direct, canonical confirmation from Game Freak that Cubone, Marowak, and Kangaskhan are, on some level, biologically compatible. A male Marowak can breed with a female Kangaskhan. The game's own systems declare that these two species share enough genetic material to produce viable offspring. For proponents of the theory, this was another major piece of evidence falling into place. It was the biological link that complemented the supposed coding link of the MissingNo unadulterated glitch. However, the mechanics of breeding also present the theory with its most significant hurdle. The golden rule of Pokemon breeding is that the offspring is always the base form of the mother's species. Therefore, if a male Marowak breeds with a female Kangaskhan, the egg that is produced will always hatch into a Kangaskhan baby. The game mechanics do not allow for this pairing to produce a Cubone. This seems, on the surface, to be a definitive debunking. The in-game system explicitly prevents the very thing the theory proposes. But a true theorist does not yield so easily. The counter-argument is that Pokemon game mechanics are, by necessity, a simplification of a much more complex in-universe reality. The games have no mechanic for a trauma-induced species change. There's no system in place to check if a Pokemon's mother has fainted and been removed from the party permanently, and then change the baby's species ID in response. Such a grim mechanic would be out of place. Therefore, the breeding system simply reflects normal, healthy circumstances. A Kangaskhan that lives, thrives, and breeds will produce another Kangaskhan. The theory doesn't dispute this. The theory is about what happens in the face of tragedy. An edge case for which the game's simple binary systems have no way to account. The creation of a Cubone is not a matter of genetics, but of trauma. The baby that hatches from the egg may well be a baby Kangaskhan, but it is the devastating event of its mother's death and the subsequent act of wearing her skull that transforms it into a Cubone. It is an environmental and psychological metamorphosis, not a genetic one. The breeding mechanics are not wrong. They just don't tell the whole story. They tell the story of life, whereas Cubone's story is one of death. Let us return for a moment to Alola, that chain of islands so deeply steeped in tradition and spiritual energy. The existence of Alolan Marowak offers what is perhaps the most poetically fitting evolution of this entire theory. The standard Kantonian Marowak is a ground type. It overcomes its grief. It becomes hard, resilient, and connected to the earth. It buries its pain and turns it into physical strength. But in Alola, things are different. The islands hum with a kind of spiritual resonance not found in Kanto. It's a place where the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead is thin. The Pokédex tells us that Alolan Marowak developed its ghost typing to defend itself against its natural predators, but it also says that the spirits of their deceased mothers protect them. What if the same originating trauma, a Kangaskhan mother dies, the baby takes her skull, has a different outcome in Alola? Perhaps the intense spiritual energy of the region reacts with the raw grief of the orphan. Instead of the mother's spirit departing, it lingers, bound to its child by an unbreakable bond of love and sorrow. The baby doesn't just wear its mother's skull. It becomes a vessel for her very spirit. This spiritual fusion is what triggers the change, not just into a Cubone, but into a Cubone with a latent connection to the spirit world. When it evolves, it doesn't harden itself against its grief like its Kantonian cousin. It fully embraces it. It becomes Alolan Marowak, a fire ghost type. The ghost typing is the literal manifestation of its mother's lingering presence. The fire typing? Perhaps it represents the burning passion of its dance, a ritual to commune with the dead. Or maybe it's the fire of vengeance, a constant burning reminder of the loss it endured. Alolan Marowak doesn't just carry its mother's bones. It carries her soul. It dances with a ghostly partner that no one else can see. This interpretation takes the core theory and imbues it with a new layer of supernatural tragedy and beauty, suggesting that the same terrible event can create two very different kinds of survivors, depending on the world around them. One grounds itself in the earth. The other sets itself ablaze with the power of the spectral plane. But let us move from the spiritual and back to the physical. If we put aside the code, the mechanics, and the lore, and simply use our eyes, what do we see? Let's examine the anatomy. Place an image of an adult Kangaskhan next to the skull worn by Cubone. The resemblance is undeniable. The overall shape of the cranium, the rounded snout, the slight flare at the jawline, and most tellingly, the small, horn-like plates on either side of the head. Cubone's skull helmet perfectly mirrors the head structure of a Kangaskhan, because it is a near-perfect fit. Now consider the alternative. If the skull is from a mother Marowak, Marowak's head is the skull it is already wearing. A Marowak's head is a Cubone's skull. It creates a strange paradox. A Marowak skull would simply look like a larger version of what Cubone already is. There are some who argue that Marowak's skull has fused to its head upon evolution, and that the skull Cubone wears is its mother's actual biological head bone from before she evolved, or from another Marowak. But the simplicity of the Kangaskhan explanation remains far more compelling and visually consistent. However, a careful observer in the modern era of Pokémon, with its high-fidelity 3D models, will spot a visual inconsistency that has become the theory's most glaring visual counter-argument. The baby in Kangaskhan's pouch. In the original sprites of Red and Blue, the baby was a low-resolution collection of pixels, nearly identical to the Kangaskhan mother. But as the graphics improved, the baby was given its own distinct design. It is not brown like a Cubone. It is a light, purplish-gray color, much like its mother. Its head shape is also slightly different from what we imagine Cubone to look like under the skull. It is smoother, rounder. This seems to be damning evidence. If an orphaned Kangaskhan baby becomes a Cubone, why does it look so different before the event? Once again, the theory adapts, weaving this discrepancy into its tragic tapestry. A baby in its mother's pouch is nurtured, protected, and healthy. Its coloration could be a sign of this healthy development. A Cubone, by contrast, is an orphan. It is alone, exposed to the elements, and likely malnourished. Could the change in color from purplish gray to earthy brown be a direct result of its new, harsh existence? A consequence of living in dirt and dust, of a poor diet and of endless crying? Its physiology could literally change due to the stress and environmental shock of being orphaned, the same trauma that redefines its identity could also redefine its biology. It is a grim explanation, but it fits the overall tone of the theory perfectly. The brown is not its natural color. It is the color of its sorrow. This leads us to the ultimate mystery. The one detail that the Pokédex has hammered home for over 2 decades. No one has ever seen its real face. Why such secrecy? What is it hiding under there? If it is simply a pre-evolution of Marowak, its face would presumably look like a smaller, softer version of the Marowak skull. But if the theory is true, then the secret Cubone is hiding is far more profound. To remove the skull would be to reveal the face of a baby Kangaskhan, twisted by grief. Its face is the final piece of evidence, the smoking gun that would confirm the connection once and for all. By keeping its face hidden, Game Freak perpetually keeps the mystery alive. They deny us the one piece of information that could definitively solve the riddle. The mask is not just part of its design, it is a narrative device. As long as Cubone wears the skull, the theory can never be truly debunked. The mystery of what lies beneath is, in many ways, more powerful than any potential revelation. It forces us to imagine the weeping face of the orphan, making the tragedy that much more personal and poignant. In the years since its inception, the Cubone-Kangaskhan theory has become more than just a theory. It has become a piece of Pokémon folklore, a modern myth passed down from one generation of fans to the next. Its endurance is a testament to its narrative power. It has all the elements of a classic dark fairy tale: a loving mother, a tragic death, an orphaned child, and a grim transformation born of sorrow. It solves multiple puzzles in one elegant stroke: Cubone's origin, the identity of its mother, the perpetual baby in Kangaskhan's pouch, and the strange connection in the game's code. It enriches the world of Pokémon, suggesting that the neat, clean lines of evolution presented in the Pokédex might not be the whole story. It hints at a world where life is messier, more tragic, and more mysterious than the games let on. Game Freak, for their part, has remained utterly silent on the matter. They have never confirmed it, but they have never explicitly denied it either. Over the years, they have had countless opportunities to put the theory to rest. They could have introduced a canonical pre-evolution for Kangaskhan, a Kangaskid that would break the cycle. They could have released official art of Cubone without its skull. They have done neither. This silence is often interpreted as a tacit acknowledgement of the theory's power, or perhaps a deliberate choice to let the community have its mysteries. They understand that a world with unanswered questions is a world that feels more real, more vast. Some things are better left to the imagination, to the whispers in the dark tunnels of Rock Tunnel, or the ghostly silence of the Pokémon Tower. So, where does that leave us? Is Cubone truly an orphaned baby Kangaskhan, wearing the last remnant of its mother as a grim memento? The evidence is compelling, yet circumstantial. The visual parallels are strong. The thematic opposition between the two Pokémon is poetically perfect. The glitch in the original games provides a tantalizing hint of a developer's lost intention. The shared egg group provides a canonical biological link. But the counter evidence remains. The mother in Lavender Town was a Marowak. The breeding mechanics don't support a direct genetic line. The modern design of the Kangaskhan baby differs from Cubone's color palette. Perhaps, in the end, it doesn't matter if the theory is true in the strictest sense of canon. Its truth lies in its ability to captivate us, to make us look at these familiar creatures in a new, more profound light. It transforms Cubone from a curious, sad little monster into the protagonist of a Greek tragedy. It recasts Kangaskhan from a simple, strong parent into a figure whose potential death has universe-altering consequences for its child. It reminds us that even in a world filled with wonder and adventure, there can be corners of profound darkness and sorrow. The next time you are wandering through the tall grass of Kanto, or exploring a dark cave, and you hear that lonely echoing cry, stop and listen. It is the sound that launched 1,000 theories, a whimper that tells a story of loss so deep it can seemingly rewrite the laws of nature. Whether you believe the story or not, you will find yourself looking at that small creature with its bone helmet and tear-stained cheeks, and seeing something more than just a Pokémon. You will see the ghost of a Kangaskhan's love, and the enduring power of one of the most heartbreaking mysteries the world of Pokémon has ever known. A mystery that, perhaps, is meant to remain unsolved, forever echoing inside a tiny skull.